Alright, welcome back everyone. So here we are for part number, oops, what happened to the screen? Yeah, we are back for part number 4 of the setup explanations in F1 22. How do they work? What do they do? What you should do? What you shouldn't do? All that will be explained now. So part 1 was about aerodynamics. If you missed that, go over to the playlist and you can check it out. It was about front wing, rear wing, and also the front right height and rear right height. Aerodynamics, basically how they generate most of your lap time. Transmission was covered in part 2. Suspension geometry was covered in part 3, and we are now in part 4 where we're going to be talking about the suspension and anti-roll bars. So suspension, what are those? Suspensions are basically, as you see, your tires, right? And then you have a car, so they have a spring in between. So between the tires and the body of your car, there's a spring. So suspension is, it can be soft, it can be stiff. That's going to define your characteristics of your car. Different characteristic of the spring gives you different results in the handling. Anti-roll bars is, when your car sways. It's also called anti-sway bar, anti-roll bars. It's the same meaning, all right? So roll is basically a side-to-side movement, and anti-roll means basically you're trying to negate that movement to control your car's behavior. So that also, it's prevalent in race cars like F1, Formula 1 cars, GT cars. These are all race cars, and they have, quite complicated systems. Thankfully for us in the game, you don't have too much of hassle when it comes to setting up the car in suspension. Now, I like to put it this way: suspension is not going to give you the most amount of time throughout a lap. Aerodynamics and ride height, they determine the most amount of time. Aero mostly, and then second most effect on your lap time is going to come from the ride height that you have, and then your suspension settings. So suspension and roll bar, when I say suspension, just assume it's both. So your suspension settings are going to come in quite handy as well. They're going to fine tune your setup to make you control the car in the way you want. Do you want it to be more pointy on entry? Do you want more grip, more front end grip on entry into a corner? Or do you want it to be having more grip on the exit? Or do you want just something that is just nice to drive in all sorts of corners, on entry, mid con, on exit? It's stable, it's not going to overstay at any time. So all those characteristics can be controlled using the suspension and anti-roll bar. So let's go over it. 4 items, one at a time. Let's see. Front suspension. Now, front suspension is basically how stiff are your front springs of your car. So take this F1 car that we have here. As you can see here, you can see the front tires. So how stiff the springs are going to be between that and the body. F1 cars, as we know, they don't have a normal coil spring. It's more of a torsion spring. Whatever it is, that's not a detail that we want to go into today. We're going to just be talking about the stiffness of it, how it affects your car handling. Now, once again, we have our good old phone, which is going to be our road, and then we have a remote that's going to be our car here. So this is the front of the car, this is the front, and this is the rear. Let's just do a little quick demonstration here. So assume this is the baseline you're starting with, all right? Somewhere in the middle. Let's just put everything in the middle just for a comparison's sake. Okay, so we have a suspension settings like this. Now when you have a very, let's say, firm suspension on the front, all right, what that means is the amount of force needed to make, let's say, X amount of movement is going to be, let's say, 20, just giving a random number here. So it's going to require a lot more force applied, whether that is through downforce as you're going faster and faster, or maybe in terms of braking force, how much you need to brake so that the front of the car gets more weight transfer. It also helps to know this, when it comes to setting up a car, because sometimes if you get understeer and oversteer, you might just think, it's probably I'm running too little aero or too much aero on the front or rear wing. It can be deceiving sometimes. So if you're happy with your aerodynamics setup, you come to your suspension setting, and this is where you can play around with things. So if you have a stiff spring on the front, this is going to limit the amount of movement the front is going to experience. So what that does to your car is it's going to increase the stability of your car on the front. The front of your car is going to be more stable. So let's say you throw a car into a corner entry, let's say we are in Italy here, let's say Parabolica, the last corner. You throw the car in, let's say just do a very sharp right turn into the corner. It will be very stable. It will not oversteer or will not like try to spin you out, but assuming you are trying to make the corner and not trying to drift around the corner. Okay, so suspension, it pretty much limits how much the movement of your car up to down. All right, so if your front is stiff, it's going to take a lot more force to move. It increases stability, but it also introduces understeer, so it's going to be more understeery on entry. If you go the opposite, all the way soft, just again for reference sake, if you go very soft, it's going to take very little force to move the front of your car. So that means there will be a lot more movement of the car. Let's say when you brake, it's gonna the front of your car is going to be closer to the floor, to the track, which means you get more grip on the front, but it comes at a cost of instability. So when it is pointier, when you have more grip on the front, it's going to make the front more unstable. Doesn't matter if it's through suspension or not. If you have too much front wing, you have too much front grip. In a way, you also have a lot of front end grip. That means it's going to cause instability on the front. Similar for the suspension. If it's too soft, on corner entry, you might notice that your car is unstable. So that's one thing that can happen. My recommendation, as always, start off at 6 suspension at any track, and then you can play around with it. If you feel on the corner entry the car is not turning enough, you can always try to go lower and lower until you feel the car is reacting the way you want it. Okay, if it's still too snappy, you can always go higher and higher. So if you feel like the car is too pointy on corner entry, you want to have less corner entry turning, so you can go higher on the front suspension. Okay, so next we talk about the rear suspension. Rear suspension, again, it acts on the opposite way of the front suspension. So if you go softer on the rear suspension, it is going to increase stability, whereas if you go stiffer, if you go towards 11 on the rear suspension, it is going to make your car more unstable. Why is that so? Let's come back to this as a reference point. So if your rear suspension is soft, right, so it's going to take very little force to move the rear. Let's say when you're accelerating, the weight balance moves rearwards, so it's gonna transfer more weight to the rear. It's gonna make the rear go lower to the ground, and that is kind of helpful when you want to accelerate. The lower your car is to the ground, more grip you have. But if it's too low, it starts touching the track, you lose downforce to the diffuser of the car, which means you're going to get oversteer. You're not going to get any traction at all. And yeah, that's what usually happens. But you might want to leave the rear suspension at 1, at as soft as it is, so that you get maximum amount of grip on the rear. It also improves your traction. So if you're getting oversteer on exit, maybe you want to increase your front suspension, maybe you want to raise your rear ride height, maybe you want to raise your rear downforce. One of those things. Okay, so leave it at 1, as soft as it is, so you don't have any trouble in corner entries and exit. You can try some wanky and wonky stuff. I've tried like everything on 11, and it kind of works. You can make it work in time trial. In an actual race condition, it might be different because tire temperatures and tire wear will affect your car's handling. So yeah, that's suspension basically. Softer front means more grip on the front. Softer rear means more stable rear. Stiffer front means less grip on the front but more stable on the front. Stiffer rear means there's less grip on the rear, but it allows the rear to move a bit more under acceleration, under braking, and in cornering. For the anti-roll bars, it is almost similar in concept. So as in, if you go soft on the front, it will give you more grip on the front. If you go stiff on the front, it's going to give you less grip on the front. Now, like I said before, anti-roll bars, they work for side to side movement, mainly the weight transfer of side to side, left to right, right to left. And what happens, let's say you take a right turn, so even let's say you're in a road car, right? When you take a right turn, the car tilts left, right? So the balance of the car goes leftwards. And then when you take a left turn, the car tilts rightwards. That's how weight transfer works, right? And or even if you're riding a bus or in a train, you can feel that, right? So similarly in race cars, in F1 cars, when you take a right turn, for example, in Italy again, when you go through Parabolica, it's a right-hander. It will have more weight on the left side of the car, so the car is gonna tilt. You don't see that in the game, we can't see it physically, but in real life you can see it. The car tilts left to the left, so that means there's more weight on the left side of the car. What that does is when there's more weight, more load on the left side, the left tires are going to have more grip. So the more grip you have on the outside while you're making a right-hander, it's going to allow you to carry more speed and be quicker in the corner. Anti-roll bars can help you with that. Suspension do help in a way. Anti-roll bar also helps. So if you leave your front suspension at 1, very soft, what that's going to do is it's going to allow the front of your car, let's say you're taking a right-hander, the front left of your car, it's going to have a lot more grip, so you can make a corner with carrying more speed. You can possibly carry 5-10 kph, even more, I don't know, but it will allow you to carry more speed into a corner. But again, when you go soft on the front, you have a lot more grip. It can be unstable if it's too much grip, so you can say if you have oversteer, let's say when you're going to high speed corners or quick direction change like Maggots and Beckett's in Silverstone, you can increase your front anti-roll bar so that the car is more stable in quick direction change. So you limit the amount of roll. If at 1, you allow the car to like swing a lot and it may not respond quick enough for quick direction change. When you make it stiff, you limit the amount of movement so your car can quickly turn the way you point it. That's how the front works. Rear is almost similar to rear suspension. If you go softer on the rear suspension, rear anti-roll bars, it's going to give you more grip on the rear. And if you go stiffer on the rear anti-roll bars, it's going to give you less grip in a way. Not exactly less grip, but you want to control how much grip you have on the rear. In this game, again, you want to leave the rear anti-roll bar at 1 so that you get a soft rear anti-roll bar. It's gonna give you more grip on the rear. At the same time, if you feel and you want to experiment with it, if you feel like when you're going through quick direction change, high speed corners, you need a bit more turn in, or you want the car to respond much quicker, you can try to increase the rear anti-roll bar. So yeah, that's pretty much about it in suspension. Let's summarize it once again to keep it simple. What you need to do in this game, you need to ideally leave the rear suspension and rear anti-roll bar at 1 so that the rear is stable. You get more traction, you get more grip, and it is stable in high speed, low speed, medium speed, any kind of speed. And the front anti-roll bar and front suspension, you may want to experiment with this from track to track. Good way to try that out is, if you want to just take the world record setup, practice with that for about 10 to 15 laps. Try to control how it feels. Even if you are slower because it's too oversteery of a setup, just try it out first, and then you will find out what you really need to change. If it's aero, maybe you want to change aerodynamics. Okay, sure, maybe you will reduce the front downforce or increase rear downforce so that the car is more stable. And still after that, if you feel like you want to change something in the car's handling, you can always come to the suspension. So suspension again, softer on the front, regardless, front anti-roll bar or suspension. Softer on the front means you get more grip, you get more turn in, more rotation mid corner. When you go stiffer, it becomes more stable. So another rule of thumb that I like to use is suspension, you can feel the effect pretty much in all kind of corners. Anti-roll bar is, when you are doing quick direction changes, you can notice the change in the value there. So if let's say I'm going through maggots and backwards, the car is not turning in quick enough, I'm turn left and then I will turn it right, but it's not responding quick enough, I will try to soften the front anti-roll bar so that it gets more grip on the front. Or sometimes the opposite may work as well. The car may have too much grip on the front tires, which is why it's not being able to change direction that quickly. So you want to limit the amount of grip that is going to one side of the tire before you make another turn. So it's always a guessing game. So try going one click lower, try going one click higher, see which fits, which is feeling better to you, which is going to give you better lap time as well, and confidence in the car. So yeah, more setups these days, I'll probably be going like very soft suspension because it gives the car more grip on the front. And then for the rear tires, the rear grip, as they are already soft, they're going to be having a lot of grip already, and compensate that with good amount of correct amount of downforce for each track, and you'll be good to go. Yeah, there you go. Any questions, please leave it in the comments. I know suspension is a bit of a, I'd say, dark art in its own. Setting it up can be a bit tricky. You can try everything 11, everything 1, it can work. It depends on your driving style, the track that you have, and then the downforce levels that you're running. Everything can change. So yeah, any questions, leave it in the comments. I'll try to answer it as efficiently, as correctly as I could. And we will see you in the next one, which is going to be part number 5 for brakes, and part number 6 we'll be talking about tire pressures, and part 7 will probably try to put it all together and see how I make a setup on, let's say, one of the tracks coming up for my, I don't know, next race or something. We can even talk about, let's say, putting all of this together and talking about different scenarios: rain, intermediates, dry. How do you adjust your setup from different conditions? So yeah, take care everyone, stay safe, and bye bye.